Hello and welcome back to Lesson 4 of the Grade 1 Music Theory course, where we will look at the musical alphabet and the different names of the notes. We'll start off looking at what a staff or stave is. We'll then see what a clef is, and we're going to focus on the treble and bass clef, as these are the only clefs needed for Grade 1 music theory, and they are also the best clefs to explore when starting to learn music theory. Using these clefs, we will then look at the different notes on the staff or stave, and following on from these, we'll see what direction different notes face according to their location on the stave, and finally we'll go on to look at the grand stave. So the staff, as it's called in the UK, or stave as it's called in the US, looks like this, and it is simply 5 straight parallel lines. Notes can be placed on the stave, so they are on or between any of the lines. The location of the note on the stave indicates how high or low the note sounds, otherwise known as the note's pitch. The lower the note on a stave, the lower the note sounds. The higher the note on a stave, the higher the note sounds. To figure out what each note on the stave is, a clef is used. There are 2 clefs you need to know at this stage, although more will be introduced at later stages. There is the treble clef and the bass clef. All clefs determine the location of a single note, and using this note, you can work out all of the other notes on the stave. We'll demonstrate this with the treble clef and then the bass clef. The treble clef states where the G note is. Wherever the curly bit in the middle of the treble clef lies on a stave indicates where the G note is. Historically, the treble clef used to be located on or between different lines on the stave, but over time it has always come to sit in the same line. Consequently, it has now become almost mandatory practice to write the treble clef in the same location as above, which means that the second line from the bottom is always a G note in a treble clef. The names of the notes, or the musical alphabet as it is sometimes called, are named after letters of the alphabet. The names of the notes start at A and go up to G. Once they reach G, they start back at A. Let's have a look at the notes on the treble clef. You'll notice that here is the G that we saw earlier. As we looked before, the G is dictated by the location of the treble clef on the stave. The note up from this G is an A, as the musical alphabet starts from A again after G. The notes then keep going up until they reach another higher G again. Likewise, the note down from the first G is F, and then the notes keep going down until they reach C. Every space on or between the lines belongs to a separate note, and as the musical alphabet ascends from A to G, you can hopefully see how you can determine what notes are what just from knowing the location of a single note. We'll reaffirm this in a second by looking at the bass clef, but before we do, it is useful to look at the lowest note here, the C. You'll notice that this note is below the D, which you would have thought would be the lowest note in the stave already. This is possible because the C has its own line that extends the length of the stave. This line is called a ledger line and allows notes to be written higher or lower than the stave, reducing the limitation of only having 5 lines in the stave. Whilst the treble clef tells us where the G is, the bass clef tells us where the F is. The curl on the bass clef is what determines where the F note is. Like the treble clef, the bass clef historically moved up and down the stave. However, over time it has come to sit on the same line at all times. It is now almost mandatory practice to write the bass clef on the line as you say it above, and for now it should be considered wrong if it's written anywhere else. The bass clef notes can be constructed in the same way the treble clef notes are. Once again, this note is always an F as determined by the location of the clef. Going up from this F, on each line and in between each line, a new note is placed and the musical alphabet continues forward as we go up the stave to the higher notes. So after F, we have G, which then ascends note after note to C. If we go back to the F we started at, you will see it now descends all the way down, note after note, to a lower F. These notes are all the ones you need to know about for the time being. The final point worth noting is the C, the highest note you can see here, once again has a ledger line through it. It is, however, the same pitch as the C we saw with the ledger line in the treble clef. In other words, they both sound exactly the same. They are both the same note. Therefore, knowing this, we can combine the two clefs together. When we do that, it becomes this. The F at the bottom sounds like this, and the F continues to rise until it gets to the C with a ledger line in the bass clef, which sounds like this. The bottom C in the treble clef sounds like this. You'll notice that, as stated in the previous slide, they are the same note. This C then ascends until it reaches the highest G, which sounds like this. Therefore, the notes go from low to high and together sound like this. Which direction the notes face is also important, as it makes the music far easier to read and understand. There are some very simple rules for determining the direction the notes face. First, you need to find the center of the staff or stave. In the treble clef, this will be the B note. In the bass clef, this will be the D note. All notes that are above this line point down, all notes below this line point up, and all notes on the line can point up or down. Therefore, in this picture, you'll notice that all the notes are on the same place on the stave in both clefs. We'll look at both clefs at the same time and look at their stem direction. The first note is the F in the treble clef and the A in the bass clef. They are both below the center line, so point up. The second note, E in the treble and G in the bass, are both above the center line, so point down. The third note, A in the treble and C in the bass, are below the center line, so point up. And the fourth note, C in the treble and E in the bass, are above the center line, so point down. And the fifth and sixth notes, B in the treble and D in the bass, are on the line, so they can point up or down. Consequently, all of these notes are pointing in the correct direction. Some final points before we conclude is that the time signatures are located just after the clef sign, and the center line on the stave is used to separate the two numbers. Finally, the grand stave is when both clefs are joined together like this. This indicates that they are to be played at the same time and is common in keyboard music, where normally the left hand plays the bass clef and the right hand plays the treble clef. So that's all you need to know and understand about different types of notes, and all that's really necessary to know about the musical alphabet for Grade 1 Music Theory. So as always, thanks for watching. There are free exercises or worksheets alongside written lessons on all Grade 1 topics available at learningmusictheory.co.uk. Please comment, like and subscribe if you found the video useful. It is really appreciated and it really helps me out. See you in the next lesson.